Today on the Star Trek Universe podcast, we are going to be talking about Picard's 3-year journey in the radically altered galaxy. That and so much more. News. Yes. I'm excited. Right after this.
Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, man.
So, we diving into some Star Trek news today, I hear.
Absolutely. We're going to jump in a little bit. Before we get to all the Picard stuff, because I know that's what everybody really wants to hear.
Yeah, man. That's
like, absolutely here. Everybody.
That's why I'm here.
I did want to say that CBS All Access is reporting they have announced that the second season premiere of Discovery and the AFC Championship game, which is apparently some sort of sporting event.
Oh, okay. I literally don't know what kind of sport that is.
I don't know.
Somebody asked me this morning, like, how'd that game treat you last night? And I was like, what game? And I legitimately didn't know it was the Super Bowl last night. Yeah. I live in a bit of a nerd world.
Yeah.
I just don't care at all. I'm sorry, football fans.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone asked me something very similar, and I'm like, oh, it was pretty great. They dropped a new Captain Marvel thing, and they dropped they dropped a new Discovery teaser.
Oh, wow. I haven't even seen the new Captain Marvel one yet. Had people texting me about the Endgame trailer, but not the Captain Marvel.
Oh, yeah, Endgame. That happened, too.
I need to go, the Endgame definitely confirmed some things. I'm excited. But anyway, you were saying about CBS All Access?
Yeah, so they announced that Discovery's second season premiere and the championship game drove a record-breaking weekend for the streaming service. So that's pretty cool. They said they added more subscribers in a single weekend than ever before. They've eclipsed their previous record during the 2017 series premiere of Discovery by 72%. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the numbers to actually know what the hell they're talking about. We just know apparently they're happy.
Well, that's one of the powers of streaming services. They don't have to release anything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which I'm surprised by, actually. Netflix doesn't have to release anything because it's not ad supported. But you'd think some of these advertisers still want to know how many ads. I guess they can tell how many ad impressions they get, even if they don't tell them how many a certain show gets. So
they just don't have to report it publicly. I'm sure they tell advertisers.
Right, but I would think it'd be hard to not get that leaked if you're taking it to third-party companies. But I guess there could be NDAs and stuff. Anyway, well, that's good. That's good news. I think they're making some course corrections this season that are leaning more toward what we as Star Trek purists want. But, as I've said over and over, the rewatch really won me over a bit on Discovery, and I'm enjoying it as its own thing. Whether it lines up with canon and all that, we'll see.
Yeah. So moving on to Star Trek Picard.
Yes, let's do that.
It's just been dropped today. Patrick Stewart said in an interview, he's being real vague about it, but they were asking him about possibly being in movies. Any more movies? And he said, oh, Lord, we're set up for possibly 3 years of this show. So if there's a film, it's a long way off. We did not know about that. We did not know 3 years.
Yeah, well, I that's interesting. I don't know what he means by that. Are they set up for 3 years of this show? Do they mean they are planning? That's really hard to suss out exactly what he means there, because it could mean they're planning the plot for 3 years. They have a 3-year plan.
Yeah, I think that is what he means, because he has said that this season is a 10-episode movie.
Cool. That's an interesting way to make television. I'm down.
We'll get into some of the other stuff over the past month that we haven't talked about a little bit. That Alex Kurtzman told The Hollywood Reporter that in this show, Picard's life was radically altered by the dissolution of the Romulan Empire. So it looks like the 2009 Star Trek is canon.
Sure. Yeah. I saw this pissed me off so much. I saw a girl on YouTube. Did I mention this already? I may have on one of the casts.
I don't know.
Saw a girl on YouTube commenting on that news, and she was crying because they were using something from the Kelvin timeline in the current timeline Picard show. And how it was breaking canon. And I was like, you obviously weren't paying attention to the 2009 movie, because the events of the destruction of the Romulan Empire happen in our timeline.
Yeah.
And then they travel and create the Kelvin timeline. And I was just like, it pissed me off so much. Because I watched a full 10-minute video of her crying, they keep feeding her videos to me on YouTube. Because I've just been hate watching them. And now I'm becoming one of those people who hate watch YouTubers. And I don't normally do that. Normally, if I don't like it, I just stop watching it. But she just keeps being so wrong about things, and it pisses me off. It's like the toxic fandom that we talk about at its worst, where she's just straight up wrong about things. Yesterday, and then having a celebration that it's yesterday she was just celebrating that Discovery was canceled because Captain Pike hashtagged a tweet unemployed.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think I've seen that girl.
Yeah, I
saw some girl saying, so hopefully this means that it's canceled. That would be wonderful news. And I'm like, what is wrong with you?
Why are you rooting against it? And I get it. If you think it's not canon and they're saying it's canon, I get that, being pissed off about that. But just it's the only new Star Trek we have. Let's try to enjoy it, and just to root against it in such a hard way, and then just to be wrong about things. The fact that Captain Pike is probably not in season 3 means nothing for Discovery. Yeah. Means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, to be clear, and I didn't include it anywhere in this news today, but we'll talk about it for a second. To be clear, what she's talking about was a little Instagram thing where Anson Mount and Ethan Peck, who plays Spock, were saying that they were unemployed. That they were never meant to be there for more than a certain small amount of time.
At least we don't know. At least we know they're in this season. We have no idea what's going to happen on Discovery after that. And based on the way they treated season 1, I'm guessing season 3 will be drastically different from season 2. They seem to be changing things up, changing crew members out. Particularly leadership. I think it's going to be a different show in season 3, and I don't expect, and I mean, even in the first episode of the season, Captain Pike says that as soon as they're done with this mission, he's stepping back, he's not there to run Discovery. He's there she obviously hasn't watched it, and she's just, it pisses. So just to not, flame her specifically, but this is just, really bothers me about the fandom, where they're rooting against a show they're not watching, and they're not paying attention, and they're just wrong. And they're you don't like the Kelvin timeline. That's fine. It's a separate timeline, but that doesn't mean you can be pissed off because the current timeline is keeping to the canon. That just pisses me off.
Oh yeah. I kind of got onto a guy on Twitter, and he hasn't responded. He probably just muted me.
Right.
But he was listing off all of the things that he didn't like about the latest episode of Discovery. He's decapitated babies and people hanging and there are fight sequences that are 300 wannabe fight sequences and everything. And I was well, I mean, I don't remember any decapitated babies in previous versions, but there was a pretty messed up looking baby Borg. And, right. As for hangings, Khan literally slit the throats of a whole station full of scientists and hung them to bleed out.
Right. And I don't want to spoil too much about this season of Discovery, because some people listening might not be watching, but the decapitated baby thing, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough to watch, and it is gross to have someone hold up a decapitated baby's head. But if you watch the episode, it is not as gross as it seems. But it's still I get their point. Those kind of complaints I can kind of get behind, because as I've said over and over, we need to have something bringing new fans into Star Trek. And Discovery is not real. It's weird, because Discovery is not for the older fans, because it's it doesn't keep to canon very well. But then it's not bringing in new fans because kids can't watch it. Not that the kids are the only kind of new fans, but like a lot of people kind of have, a lot of adults have their thoughts about Star Trek. They're either pro or con, you know, they're like, it's really hard to get any of my friends to care about Star Trek who don't already care about Star Trek. And the way to bring new fans into the fan base and just to like supply this type of content to an upcoming generation is to make it family friendly. You don't have to make it childish, but family friendly. And that Discovery is not that by any means.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there is room for all sorts of different types of tones. And, you know, I know people who let their kids watch Discovery. I know people those same people let their kids watch Game of Thrones, and that's what they're into. That's what they dig. It's like, and that, what we're talking about in that episode of Discovery felt very Game of Thrones to me.
Yes, it did. That's the thing. I'm not saying there aren't people who let their kids watch that stuff, but that is very different. I understand the parents who don't want to watch that with their kids, and I also understand the desire to watch Star Trek with your kids.
Right. But for that matter, and to my point, you know, times change, and you know what? You and I love Star Trek First Contact. We loved it when we were kids because we saw it when we were kids. I remember at the time there were tons of people online complaining that this is the worst thing that ever happened. How could they have a PG-13 Star Trek? Like, this is this is the first movie that they can't let their kids watch.
Times change, that is true, and I'm fine with that. But I think that was the beginning, maybe not the very beginning, but it is the aging up of Star Trek in a way that does make it harder to bring in new people, particularly children. And I'm not saying that everything has to be family friendly. There is room for both in the universe. Just like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have the Daredevil stuff that is incredibly dark and Punisher. Oh my gosh, just finished season 2 of Punisher. The best season of all of the Netflix Marvel stuff. It was amazing, but man, it's dark. It's dark. There is a moment in the last episode of season 2 of Punisher, those of you who've seen it probably know what I'm talking about, that I am still viscerally hurting from, and not just like physically, but like emotionally. I am scarred. Like, I feel scarred from it, and it's like 2 days ago, and I can't get over it. That stuff's not for kids, and that's fine. But it's just, I don't know. You know, you're going to want to raise your kid watching Star Trek. It's going to be a thing. Yeah. And it's going to be hard to do if there's decapitated baby heads. So I understand the frustration.
It's not going to be hard for me because there's freaking 50 years of continuity that they can watch before that.
Yeah, but try to get them interested in 60s Star Trek, especially in the future. Like, it's already hard. I'm not saying they won't be. I'm not saying you can't raise your kids to love it. But if your kids are kind of normal and have normal access to normal media, they're going to have faster attention spans even than they do now, and it's going to be harder to get them to love older Star Trek.
I will say okay, but you know, my youngest sister, she 12 years younger than me, got really into the original series. She's even more of a purist than I am. She prefers the original special effects. Sure. You just never know. Knowing my luck, any kid I have will probably be really into sports.
Right, exactly. That's very likely. I'm just talking about a normal, like the average kid from today. There's obviously lovable weirdos like your sister. Wow. Love you, Brittany.
She's not listening to this.
But I mean, even me, I love Star Trek and what it says and the plot lines, but I have a hard time keeping pace with the old stuff. You know, I didn't when I was younger, but as I got older and older, like as I experienced the newer kind of content, it's hard to watch some of that old stuff. And I mean, you can be selective about what, even the select episodes that are some of your favorites are still incredibly slow and hard to follow. Not hard to follow. That's wrong. They're just slow. They're slow.
Well,
and that's fine.
Yeah, kids are getting quicker, kids are getting faster, and, they're also getting more desensitized. So I don't think Discovery is really that bad.
Sure. But anyway, that's not, the point is not that kids can't watch Game of Thrones. The point is a lot of parents don't want their kids watching Game of Thrones. And that's who this guy is that's commenting that they don't like baby heads. It's someone who's protective of their child. And like, you get to choose morally what you want your children to watch.
Oh, I don't, he didn't say anything about a child. I think he's just a gatekeeper.
Maybe. I thought you said, maybe, I don't remember where that came up. Okay. But still, that's the complaint I get a lot, is people wanting to be able to watch it with children.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think I mentioned that because of First Contact, all the people saying, oh, we can't let our kids watch the thing.
Maybe. I don't know. This has gone on longer than I meant it to. Sorry. I just was commenting on that guy's comment. And we have the internet.
Uh-huh. All right. We need to move on. Star Trek Picard, back to that. Kurtzman has said that he and his team and Michael Chabon, the showrunner, they prepped this 34-page document to pitch this show to Patrick Stewart.
Uh-huh.
And he walked into the room and he had a huge smile on his face and said, "This is wonderful." He says, Stewart threw down the gauntlet. He said, "If we do this, I want it to be so different. I want it to be both what people remember, but also not what they're expecting at all. Otherwise, why do it?" And as for TNG guest stars, they say anything can happen. Jonathan Frakes has talked about the Picard series to Deadline. He says the feeling is we would love to be a part of it, but the feeling is also that it's Patrick's show. Having said that, I can't imagine a world where there's no reference to what happened to the rest of the Next Gen cast. Patrick isn't playing Captain Jean-Luc Picard this time. He's done with that. He's done with Starfleet in his show. That's about the only thing I know about the show. Patrick and I had a steak dinner a couple of nights ago, and this man, who I've known for 31 years, is so excited about this show, he's like a little kid. It's fabulous. He's thrilled and excited to be invited into the writer's room, and he's a producer on the show, and he's part of the development of the story arc. Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Well, the biggest thing in there, I've heard a lot of speculation about this, and maybe it was confirmed previously, but I don't recall it being confirmed that he's out of the Federation. Was it previously confirmed?
He's out of Starfleet, not necessarily the Federation.
Right. I'm sorry. I get those two confused, and I know they're not the same thing.
Right.
But out of Starfleet, that's a big deal. That's a big deal about what this show's going to be about.
If this is following the dissolution of the Romulan Empire, I'm assuming since it was co-written by Kurtzman, where we can just pretty much assume at this point until we're given further notice that the Star Trek countdown to the 2009 Star Trek movie comic is canon.
Yeah, I would think so.
And in that book, Picard was I think ambassador to Vulcan, the Federation ambassador to Vulcan. And with Spock tried to save the Romulans, and he's had a lot of dealings with the Romulans, more so than any other race in the Next Generation, even more than the Borg. The Romulans were the bad guys. So I think that Picard has a lot of ties with the Romulans. He was instrumental in pushing forward with the reunification process. Yeah. So I think based on what they're saying, it's going to have a lot to do with him dealing with so few Romulans left in the world, in the galaxy.
Well, yeah, and you know, when an empire is dissolved, that means power vacuums in other parts of space. We know Romulus was destroyed, but the Romulan Empire was a big sweeping part of the galaxy. And that could lead to all kinds of political strife, and some Romulans might join certain factions of other, some Romulans might want to join the Federation, some Romulans might want to, join the Klingon Empire. Who knows? It could be all kinds of stuff happening for Romulans spread across the stars. And I think, we've seen what happens with divided groups like the Bajorans when Cardassia left. The interesting political maneuvering that happens in that power vacuum is really cool, and all the Maquis stuff. I just imagine some really cool political stuff happening with the various Romulan factions.
Yeah, maybe, man. I don't know. He does say that the show will reference the present day at times. He says, I'm not saying we are in the present day, we're not, but the world that we find Jean-Luc in is not quite the world that we left him. In all good things, I grew a beard. They made me up old. I looked older then, 18 years ago, than I don't think I'm saying too much, than I will in the upcoming series. Jean-Luc and Patrick Stewart are the same age. I've looked at those pictures. I kind of disagree with them.
Oh, really?
I think he looks older now.
Well,
I'm sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a beard. I mean, he's been preserved mighty well for his age.
Absolutely.
He was. I don't think it's that he looks old now comparatively to his actual age. I think it's weird that he looked as old as he did when Star Trek Next Generation began.
When he's in his 40s?
He's still, to me, he always looked like he was in his 50s or 60s. And when Next Generation began. And I think that's what they were going for, they were going for that sort of gray haired, bald, captain type. But I think he just looked older when he was younger. And now he's just sort of aged into how he's kind of always looked.
Yeah, it's weird. It's one of those William Hartnell things. It's like when you go back and look at the original Doctor Who episodes, William Hartnell, he's like this old man, and he was 40.
Yeah. You start to realize you're getting up on his age.
Well, not only that, but at a certain point, if you look back at Patrick Stewart, he, and you read about his life, as a kid, he had to grow up really quick. He went through some rough stuff. And, I think that ages you, man. I really do. I don't know. Our 40-year-olds look like a bunch of man babies.
You mean the ones of today?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've, who knows if it's better or worse, but we've gotten, just more relaxed about living and less less hard lives.
We don't have bombs being dropped on our heads and
sure. But we also that's 2 generations ago we're talking about. If you're talking bombs being dropped on their heads, our parents didn't have bombs, but our parents were still in this weird transitional time where they weren't allowed to, I guess because our parents didn't have bombs, they coddled our generation a little longer and we just had a safer environment.
Yeah.
It's more like we didn't have bombs dropped on us as children that led us to this weird, I don't know, man. We're all children these days.
Well, specifically, I've read things about Patrick Stewart in his childhood about his dad being in the war and being shell shocked and abusive, and Stewart had they actually he did see some sort of bomb fall from the air or something to do something. They were running from bombs.
How old is he? What war is he talking about?
I'm assuming it's World War II.
Well, he's not.
He might be a kid.
Yeah, he'd be very good. How old is he now?
70s, I think.
70s. That's what I was thinking, because he might have been. Yeah, maybe that. Maybe he was that old enough to remember that. And that's not to say his life wouldn't have been impacted. Okay.
He's 78.
78. So 80 years ago. Yeah, no, that tracks. He would have been a child in the mid 40s and later 40s. He would have been a little older. Yeah, that tracks. I thought he was a little younger. I thought he was early 70s, but yeah, 78. No, totally.
Yeah. He's talked about how the show is going to be more grounded than a lot of other sci-fi. He specifically mentioned there won't be buildings floating in space or something. I'm not sure what he's referencing. Maybe the last Star Trek movie. I don't know.
I don't know what he's talking about either. Can't think of any Star Trek with floating buildings.
Well, there was the anti-grav buildings in Star Trek Beyond, and they were I don't. That's the only thing I could think of. That's what made me think of. He says, what I was afraid of was in some way this was going to be jokey. I don't want to do that. I respect the work we did on Next Gen, and also it changed my life in every way. I said, you know what? I think I'm up for this. But I asked a lot of questions, and the answers were very satisfying. I was very struck by how clever these people were I was talking to, who could tell a narrative very well and seemed to be tuned into what an actor might need to hear. So I signed on.
Do you think he'll appear in Lower Decks?
I don't possibly,
because I was just thinking about Lower Decks the other day and what they could do with that show. We don't have a time period on Lower Decks, right?
No, we don't.
What I would love to see from Lower Decks, or an idea I had the other day thinking about Lower Decks, was what if it is happening literally during another show, like The Next Generation, for instance? Like where you have actual episodes of The Next Generation happening in the background while you have these Lower Decks crewmen also experiencing these things. Like you could literally just take every episode of The Next Generation and like put an animated characters running around behind the scenes doing the things they would need to do, but also experiencing some of the same mishaps or problems. I don't know. I was just thinking about it, and then it just reminded me so much of like, isn't it Family Guy that Picard or Patrick Stewart shows up on a lot? Is it Family Guy? Yeah. I was just like,
Family Guy and American Dad both.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So I was just thinking about the fact that he has so much experience in the animation and the comedy world, and that he could. I wonder if he'd be down for that, like playing a not necessarily even a comedic version of Picard, just a Picard that is interacting with a comedic version of the universe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a random thought I had the other day. So back to the news.
Yes. Now this is a. I don't think he's joking. He's being funny about it, but he's not joking, apparently. So last fall, James McAvoy got on social media and said that he wanted to play the young Picard if they needed anyone for flashbacks. And then he was doing an interview with MTV, and he says that he was jonesing for some trekking. And they told him to make his pitch, and he says, "I will take you where no Star Trek fan has gone before. I will reveal things about Jean-Luc Picard that no one ever wanted to see."
Wow.
And they asked him for him to do like some of the catchphrases, and he said, "Engage, make it so number one, tea, Earl Grey, hot." And he sounded just like Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, that's you know, he's had years of working up to seeming like a Patrick Stewart type.
Yeah.
I wonder, I know this is probably a really bad idea, particularly because of, there's no way this would happen. No way. And I don't even think it's a good idea, but like, let's just talk about the idea of Tom Hardy doing it again.
Oh.
The worst, by far, I think the worst Star Trek movie. And, just like Tom Hardy now, the Tom Hardy we all know, trying to play Picard. That sounds bonkers.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
No, it surely wouldn't.
As much as I hated the character of Shinzon, and I hated most of that movie and everything it tried to do, he wasn't bad.
Oh, no. I think he was great then. The version of Picard he was playing, but at this point, Tom Hardy is almost the age Picard was when Next Gen started, or at least the age Patrick Stewart was, and he's just such a differently shaped and different looking and acting guy.
Oh yeah, I mean he's swole now.
He is swole. He is swole. And I'm not saying Patrick Stewart ain't swole. He's pretty swole. He's an attractive man.
Yeah. So, Alex Kurtzman, this is over to Discovery News. Alex Kurtzman is talking to Digital Spy here about syncing up with and expanding Canon. He says, we're syncing up with Canon this season. So that's his promise, this season. He says, we know we're 10 years pre-TOS, but there are a lot of big questions, like how come Spock is never mentioned as half-sister of Michael Burnham? This season is all about understanding what the relationship is. By the end of the season, we'll be synced up with Canon. I would like to interject here. We went, 25 years without him mentioning Sybok?
Yeah. It's weird that's the thing, the go-to thing that he's talking about. Like, I know that a lot of these guys only care about the character stuff, but a lot of us care about the ships and the other way. Like, I'd really love if by the end of season 2 we got a refit of the Enterprise because it was in a big battle or something, and they like just straight up have the original Enterprise like fly off.
Possible spoilers here. There's an episode coming up called The Sounds of Thunder, which is a reference to, I can't remember the name of the person who did it. We think is a reference to an old time travel story.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we get, like, just a complete, like, reshift. Like, a shift of the timeline.
Gotcha. I mean, I'm very okay if they can just make the corrections in the timeline.
Yeah.
That work. Like, they just need to find out that the way they're communicating holographically damages the environment somehow.
Uh-huh.
And they need to have all the refits on all the ships they need to have done.
Mm-hmm.
They need to just, back off a little bit on some of the tech. I don't see all that happening, though. I think they're like, it's going to line up with canon just because we have Spock is going to line up with canon. It's like, right. There's a lot more to it, man.
He does go on to say, we touched on canonical elements this season beyond just the characters. There are other things that will come into play that you have seen on TOS. Again, the idea is always to build on what came before without negating what came before. All right. We mentioned that the Telosians might show up this season. Anyone who knows the menagerie or the cage knows what they're capable of. Has Discovery just been a fever dream from the Telosians?
Hope not. The entirety of Discovery has just been inside of Captain Pike's head post the cage.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how they might fit into the world of Discovery. The series can go for a long time. A lot of series have gone for a long time. The key is to constantly find a way to reinvent while also always delivering what people expect from the show. I thought this was interesting. He told Entertainment Weekly, there are no real one-offs on Discovery. Every piece of the puzzle is connected to the finale. We worked backward from knowing the outcome we wanted to get to.
All right.
There are episodes that seem standalone that are fundamentally part of what we're going for in the end. They are planning and writing for season 3, but it hasn't been picked up yet. He and Caden said that Georgiou will show up in season 3. Caden and Kurtzman said that Georgiou will show up in season 3 of Discovery. Even though it hasn't been officially announced yet. Section 31, they don't know what the timeline is yet for that series. He says we're going to be seeing the Picard show first.
Yeah, I bet.
And our hope is that it will be at the end of the year.
Wow. That would be pretty awesome.
End of this year or the very beginning of next, is what he's saying.
That's interesting, especially that, that it could come so soon is interesting, but it's also interesting because that's about when Discovery started this year. Mm-hmm. So that makes me nervous that either Discovery is not coming back or that they're going to hold off. Who knows? Maybe they'll run them concurrently to try to get folks paying attention to Discovery. I could see them running 2 seasons together to be like, hey, new Star Trek out tonight, kind of like they used to run Voyager or DS9 right into Voyager.
As he said, though, several times now, the plan is not to run these things together.
Right.
It's one at a time.
Oh, I know. But I could see them having some overlap just to try to get people interested in Discovery that are not. All those Picard fans being like, well, I'm paying for the service now. Let's see what they're doing on Discovery.
Mm-hmm. So Hollywood Reporter was talking to Jonathan Frakes about the faith versus science storyline and would it mesh with Gene Roddenberry's secular humanistic vision of the future. And Frakes said, I'm not sure they're embracing the idea of faith as much as they're embracing the conversation about faith versus science. It's like the Scopes trial. The idea we're all naive to believe there's not a higher power out there applies to the 24th century as much as it does to the 21st century. We've evolved as a culture a lot since Gene Roddenberry was with us. We have to stay current on so many levels in the filmmaking and storytelling. The moral compass of the country seems to have a bit more of a liberal bend than it did back in the day. Gene comes from the 1960s. He was an old hippie. He says when Alex took over the show, essentially, we had a really productive sit down where he explained the arc of the season, essentially, and we talked about Trek in general and my guys and about Roddenberry. He was interested in all of it, and it was a pleasure, really, talking to him and listening to him. He's got a great curiosity, but he also has a really great vision. Gene Roddenberry was an atheist. So he didn't believe in heaven, of course, but if he was looking down on all of this, I think he would be very, very pleased with the hands that Star Trek is in these days. Mm-hmm. That's from Frakes, so
yeah,
you guys can call him a traitor if you want.
That's some pretty bold. Just anytime you look back at the creator of something who has died and say, "Yeah, I think they'd be very happy with the stuff that I'm involved in." Just kind of a bold statement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming from a guy from the Next Generation, which gives it some credibility, but it's still kind of a bold claim.
Right. Well, I think I included it here because I felt like, Frakes is part of the old guard at this point.
Right.
And, it was like a lot of buzz, a few years ago when, I don't know, someone from like TMZ or somebody asked LeVar Burton what he thought of one of the new Star Trek movies. And he was like, I mean, it was good, but it's not Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, dude, why would you say that?
Well, see,
man?
that's the thing is like, none of this matters to me. Like, but someone who is involved with the current thing saying the creator would love it is like, yeah, sure, that's rich. And someone who is not involved in the current iteration saying it's not as real as the stuff he did. Yeah, that's rich. Good job.
The thing that killed me about LeVar saying that those few years ago, whatever it was, he said it's not like what it was with Gene. It's like, dude, like more than half of your show wasn't done with Gene.
Yeah.
Sorry, but were you not doing Star Trek?
Yeah. I mean, he was at least involved in the creation of those characters, probably.
Gene was involved in the shitty 2 first seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah. That
was misogynistic and weirdly bigoted somehow. Like, I don't know. Like Frakes said, he's from the 60s. He was antiquated and, also apparently quite the drug addict from what I understand by that point. So there are lots of horrible stories about what was going on with Gene at the time. Right. And I hate that, but
yeah. And it's all neither here nor there. I'm not trying to say Frakes is wrong. I'm not trying to say Burton is wrong. And I'm definitely not trying to say that Roddenberry is wrong. I just think that all of this show is bigger than all of them. The concepts and what we're trying to see happen on these shows is bigger than all those people. It's been made by so many hands, and it is the reason we met. One of the reasons we have this podcast is we are expressing the kinds of desires we have as fans. And it's okay for all of them to express what they think, but all of it is so self-interested, especially at their level where you're like, I love it. I'm in it. I hate it. I'm not in it. It's just like all of that. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I don't think, honestly, from those two dudes, I don't think they were doing anything but speaking their actual thoughts about it.
Right. Maybe.
But, I mean, it's not like he's getting his own Riker series. Which is what he's been wanting for years and years.
But he's still directed this week, so it's not like he's not involved.
I know.
And it's not like he won't appear as the captain of the Titan if they ask him. So he's out to play ball. He's out to play nice. And Burton, when he said that about the Kelvin timeline, didn't know that this was all going to happen with the Picard series. So it's still self-interested. Even if they're both speaking their mind truthfully, because it's still self-interested. It's still like, if Burton had said, he wouldn't have said that while he was making The Next Generation, like, because he's in it. So.
Yeah, I get it.
That's my whole point.
I know.
Not that they're wrong. That's what I said. They're just self-interested.
So I'm kind of excited about. Well, hold on. First of all, I have no right to be really excited about this. Star Trek Short Treks is now available on Netflix internationally, outside of the U.S. and Canada.
Cool.
So people out there can watch it. Michael Giacchino, the composer, is going to direct one of the new animated short treks that they've just announced. They're going to put out a couple of animated short treks, and in the spring, apparently.
Cool.
I think it's weird that he's directing, but awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm excited for any new Trek. I want more.
And the other short trek is going to be directed by Olatunde Osunsami, which is the guy that just directed this last episode of Discovery.
Cool. I thought this episode was a little weird, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think he also did the Calypso episode of Short Treks.
Oh, cool. I loved that one.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it.
Someone on Twitter asked the showrunners of Section 31 if the show will abandon Star Trek's Optimism. And they said, oof, that is not what we were aiming to do. We will never lose sight of what Star Trek represents. So, more bullshit from the producers, right, Matt?
Yeah. No, everything, like, if it's not actual information, anything they say about, like, even the Canon stuff, like,
yeah,
I'm excited that Kurtzman says they're trying to resolve the Canon issues, but it's like you're saying that because you want more people who care about Canon to watch. It's all, except for, like, the hard news. Most of it, I'm just like, yeah, you would say that.
Yeah.
And like, but the interesting thing I find about that sentence, his oof is funny. It's like
her, actually.
Sorry, didn't know. See, there goes my sexism showing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sexist as hell. But you just got me with that old doctor joke, where it's like,
yeah,
I can't operate. This is my son. The doctor was a woman. Anyway.
Wow, that was haphazardly constructed there, sir.
I thought about slowing down the show to tell the joke. I didn't, and now we've dwelled on it even longer. I apologize. Anyway, showrunners can be women too.
That's right.
Real women run shows.
Right.
Oh, gosh. Where were we?
Show running women are for grown-ups.
What?
Nothing.
I find the oof funny. It sounds almost like it hit her. Like, ooh, no, that's not our intention. And then she's looking over her notes. Ooh, maybe we are doing that.
Yeah, I didn't read it that way. But.
That's obviously that's not how she intended it to come off, but that's how it sounds to me. I think that you can. The thing is, I love Star Trek, and I do appreciate the optimism, and it's optimistic just by the sense that like the human race is going to survive. And that like it's going to go forward off this planet and learn to navigate the galaxy and learn to have relationships with other cultures in such a large way. Like that's optimistic on the face of it. But my favorite Star Trek is the stuff that deals with the moral gray areas. So to me, I'm not looking for a Pollyanna Star Trek. So
I mean, I think this is something that the fans don't really understand is you can be dark and gritty and have really negative things happen in the show and still be overall optimistic. DS9 is a great example of that.
Sure. Well, also Discovery right now is a great example of that.
At this point.
That first season, it's really all about the crew overcoming the sort of pessimist environment they've been put in with Lorca and the entire mirror universe and all of that. Just like it's all about them overcoming that and sticking to the ideals of the Federation and how that brings them through. As dark as Discovery is, it's still about Federation ideals.
Which, if you look at season 1 of Discovery and you have a problem with what Lorca's doing up till like the last couple episodes that we see him in, I would direct you kindly to DS9's In the Pale Moonlight.
Yep. Great episode.
All right, so Section 31 is apparently going to be an ongoing series.
Sweet.
That's what Kurtzman said.
Cool. I was assuming that, but I guess it could have been a limited series.
It hasn't been picked up yet. It has been announced, but it is currently in development. It does not have a series order, a green light, unlike Picard and Lower Decks. Speaking of Lower Decks, Kurtzman says Lower Decks is totally different from anything we're doing on any of these other shows, and we decided to tell that story and make those people the heroes. He says it is an animated comedy, but it will never laugh at Star Trek. It's embracing and loving of all the tropes of Star Trek, but it's never laughing at it. It's not Trek and Morty. He says, Mike Mann came to me and said, I want to do a show about the people in the lower decks of the spaceship whose job it is to take the yellow cartridge and put it in the processor, make sure the banana comes out the other side. You can stop pitching because that's perfect. It's not that we're doing Rick and Morty in the world of Star Trek, although if you watch Rick and Morty, you will see that it is deeply influenced by Star Trek, which is really wonderful. It's just a very different tone. The key is to laugh with Star Trek and not at Star Trek. It will skew slightly more adult. Now,
interesting.
They are developing a kid-friendly Star Trek animated series.
Oh, wow.
That will not be on CBS All Access.
Yay.
Eh?
Well, that is one way to tackle the thing I've been saying for months now. So that's exciting. Mm-hmm. That's big news.
It is.
That's
literally all we know about it.
Right. So obviously I can't comment on the details because there are no details, but my one thing on that is that part of what I love about Star Trek and The Next Generation, it taught me to love science fiction. Mm-hmm. It's the thing that I grew up on. I mean, I loved Back to the Future before I loved this. But sitting down and watching The Next Generation as a kid taught me to love serious science fiction. And so it makes me a little wary of the stratification of Star Trek. Like I don't want there to only be Star Trek where they're holding dead babies' heads and Star Trek that's for kids. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what they're doing. It seems like they're doing with Star Wars, and they're not there yet. Well, but they have the whole section in the middle that is for everyone on the big screen. But then they're talking about making these darker, grittier Netflix shows or Disney Plus shows or whatever.
Right. You want Doctor Who, Torchwood, and the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Exactly. Right now, we've got no Doctor Who. And maybe that's what Picard will be, but I don't think it's necessarily sounding that way. So I need a Doctor Who. That's exactly it. Thank you.
Come on, dissolution of the Romulan Empire, throw in a dash of rheumatic syndrome.
You get that kid-friendly show right there.
An old man dealing with the world changing around him. It's like Picard's version of Gran Torino.
You know how much kids love Gran Torino. Yeah, refugees and space Alzheimer's. That sounds like exactly what kids want.
Although I think, wouldn't rheumatic syndrome be closer to dementia? Because he was thinking that he was in the past.
Right. Whatever. I don't know. I don't know
I think space dementia is funnier.
All right, fine. I was just trying to make a joke.
Trying being the operative word.
Yeah, you're right. Your explanation and reprocessing of the joke was way funnier. You made it way funnier than just laughing and moving on.
No, but this conversation is delightful. This segment of the conversation was delightful for me.
You're like,
screw the listeners.
I don't care if anyone else has fun. I just have fun feeling like I'm right. Not even necessarily am I right. I just like to feel that I'm right.
I feel like that's a misrepresentation of my character.
I'm going to let you have it just so we can move on.
All right. So Kurtzman did say that they are trying to figure out what the animation is going to be for the kid-friendly show. He wants to be visually entirely different than short treks. For short treks and for all the animated things are supposed to be entirely different.
Cool.
So Kurtzman was talking to Variety, and he says, one of the things that is really beautiful about Star Trek is there are interesting offshoots and there are interesting areas in the world of Star Trek and points of view in the world of Star Trek that allow for tremendous variety in kinds of stories you can tell. I think it is because Trek has such a long history and tradition of honoring every character. So being able to shift points of view radically, even when the show is about one main character, to be able to jump into another character's point of view, it is constantly challenging me to find different ways to tell stories. And not only that, but to also come up with structural paradigms that are different. I haven't yet found a limitation on that with Star Trek. I don't think there is a you can't do it this way rule on Star Trek, which ask the fans, they'll tell you there is, apparently.
Well, some fans will, but I'm in agreement with him.
Yeah, that made me happy.
Well, and that I'm totally with him. The thing that makes me, and Discovery gives me hope because there are very different episodes in Discovery. Obviously the mud episode versus, something a lot darker. They're very dark episodes and very light episodes, and there's a lot of fun. Fun to be had while serious stuff gets tackled. But like I said, that is the thing that worries me about the sort of stratification of having a kids show versus like having some of those DS9 episodes where they're just like following Quark trying to do some sort of caper or whatever. Like,
right.
Those are hilarious. Like the episode with Nog and Jake trying to sell the stem bolts. I love that kind of stuff, just sort of couched in these series. And that's the kind of episode that, to me, brings you in if you're not already a fan, and then you learn to care about the characters. I would cite, me and you both, we're big Joss Whedon fans, but somehow, both of us, the first thing we saw of Joss Whedon, any of his stuff, was the puppet episode of Angel. And that brought us in. It's such a silly episode where Angel gets transformed into a puppet, and it brought us into the world of Angel, and then we went and watched all of Buffy and Angel and Firefly and Dollhouse and Cabin in the Woods. And just so much. So I've had so much joy brought to my life and so much expansion of my mind about what storytelling can be because of a stupid puppet episode.
And that puppet episode, which the thing that got me to actually watch it was directed by Ben Edlund. And I went, oh shit, the creator of The Tick. This whole thing has been tongue-in-cheek. I was like, this whole canon is tongue-in-cheek.
And that's the beautiful part. It can be that tongue-in-cheek, and then you can have the same character many seasons earlier break someone's neck, and it be the most heartbreaking thing you've ever seen on screen. Like, that's the same character doing a horribly dark action and then doing having a silly puppet episode. And it's just like, man, I just can't. I just can't say enough about how important that kind of storytelling is to me.
Yeah. And that silly puppet episode was followed by like one of the most heartbreaking episodes in the entire canon too.
Would you lie to me now? No.
No. There's a hole in the world.
Yeah, hole in the world. Sorry. Same character. That's why I was thinking of it. Yeah. Okay, guys. If you love Star Trek and haven't seen all the canon of the Joss Whedon canon, by the way, if Buffy the Vampire Slayer series that's supposed to launch in 2019 is in the original canon, I'm going to have to start a podcast.
More power to you, man.
Just saying, I may have to start a podcast.
Okay.
If it's in the original canon. If it's not, I won't be. And I'm putting this out into the world just to tell you how much interest there is if you make that show in the original canon, people. All you Star Trek people who are listening to this podcast.
The last I heard, it was in the original canon.
Was it? Because that's not the last I heard. It's all kind of early news at this point. Last I heard, it's a reboot, and I do not want that.
Yeah, I think Joss isn't going to be the showrunner, but last I heard, it was in the same canon.
That would be great.
I'll have to go look and see what's happening.
We'll talk about that off of our Star Trek podcast. Sorry.
Yeah. On to some movie news here. We have confirmation that director S.J. Clarkson has moved on from Star Trek 4. Deadline is reporting that Star Trek 4 has been shelved due to the negotiations with Pine and Hemsworth. That doesn't mean the Tarantino Star Trek isn't shelved, though. The Paramount president was talking to New York Times, And he seems very interested to, quote, breathe new life into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Terminator, Star Trek, and G.I. Joe. The question is begged whether all of those properties stand the test of time, and he says, imagine, for instance, Paramount giving Star Trek to Tarantino. Suddenly people's eyes light up. Yours just did, talking to the interviewer. So apparently that is very much a thing that's still on his mind. That was put out January 31st. So, just a few days ago.
So Tarantino Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it before. And I don't think I've gotten real specific on my feelings. I'm okay with a dark, profanity-laden, like, violent Star Trek. Like, that doesn't bother me. What does kind of bother me is what worries me, I should say. It doesn't bother me because it doesn't exist yet. But what worries me is that Tarantino's not really made something with an existing canon before. Mm-hmm. And he so loves to create his own canon, and I don't know that he will have respect for any kind of canon. He seems like the kind of guy who makes what he thinks is cool and kind of says, screw whether it makes sense or whether it has it worries me that if he makes a Star Trek movie, it will be a totally different canon, which if they say that is fine with me.
Well, I don't know that it's totally accurate that he hasn't made anything with a
existing canon. What has he made with an existing canon now?
There were a series of movies. I want to say the character of Django was from other things.
Okay. But I want, made that maybe. I don't know that. But I would say that I wonder if he kept to that canon. Cause to me, Django seemed like just a piece of, work that he made all on its own. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he did his spin on it for sure. But, I don't know. I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen any of the others.
Any of the others? No Tarantino? You like?
Oh, no,
Fiction,
none of the other Django movies. Oh
yeah, I haven't either. And I imagine there wasn't much to the canon. There wasn't much canonical stuff in that movie that, like, it's just he's a slave who shows up, and that's the movie. Right. That's how the movie starts. So it's not like he had to have deep. You don't know much about where he comes from or where he goes at the end of that movie. Mm-hmm.
And I might be thinking of something else too. I don't know, but yeah, it might not have been him. But anyway, it doesn't really matter what he. I don't know. We don't have confirmation that he's going to do a cursing film. We don't like.
Right. Sure. I was just pointing out that's what seems like most people are worried about or concerned about. None of that bothers me. It does bother me that I don't know that he'll make a show that make a movie that resembles Star Trek in any way, which could, like they said, breathe new life, but it also just may not be It may be a real LeVar Burton Star Trek, not my real Star Trek.
Well, we don't know what cast. We know that certain people of the existing Bad Robot films have been kind of briefed on it. Carl Urban specifically said that the Tarantino Trek pitch was, quote, bananas. So,
it sounds fun. It definitely sounds fun. I'd obviously go see it.
Oh, absolutely. At this point, I feel like the movies should just be like auteur directors doing whatever they want with Star Trek, casting however they want. Nothing is canon. It's all part of the multiverse. Let's just have fun.
I'm fine with some movies being that way, but as I've said over and over, what I love about Star Trek is the deep canon. It's like part of what I love. So you take all that away, you got to make me care again. And maybe they will.
The thing that would make me care is seeing new versions, I think, as far as the movies are concerned.
New versions of what? New versions of
Star Trek. Just different versions of Star Trek. Like, just seeing a different director's take on it would be interesting to me. I don't need it to line up with what's going on in the TV show.
To me, that is less interesting. And here's why. Like, to me, if you're going to make your own thing, make your own thing. Like, I have no reservations and would absolutely go see a movie by Tarantino about a group of spacefaring Federation types, like doing their thing. But I really just don't have a desire to see a complete reinterpretation of the same universe or the same characters. Like, that universe exists, that those characters exist. Like, make more in that universe or make your own universe. I've got reboot fatigue, and you can say multiverse all you want, but all you're talking about is reboots.
I'm sorry you have a limitation on your imagination, Matt.
I'm sorry you can't respect limitations of the art form.
Oh, I respect the limitations of the art form. Like a bastard, I respect the limitations of the art form.
No, you don't, Dave. This is an intervention. You've been slipping too long on Canon, man. I understand. We can be happy with what's being made. We can enjoy it. But dang it, I'm a staunch Canon guy, and I'm not going to be hated. I'm not going to be hated.
You talk about it every episode. That
is very true. I don't deny that. We talk about it less and less. I try. But there's always different things to say. Canon is important. It's part of Star Trek.
You should just start a separate podcast called the Canon Curmudgeon.
I'm not gonna. You used to be a Canon Curmudgeon too, man.
Yeah, but then I decided I wanted to like things.
You can enjoy things and acknowledge problems with them.
I acknowledge problems with things, man. I acknowledge it. That's why I say that Discovery is a separate canon. But I can still enjoy it. It doesn't mean that there's no stakes. All of the shit is fiction, man. Who cares? Like, clearly, just enjoy it as a separate canon.
We do.
Oh my gosh. All right, so according to Bloomberg, this CBS board is going to be meeting a week from January 31st, which is just a few days from now. And they're going to be talking about finding a permanent chief executive officer and possibly merging with Viacom again. So that would mean that since Les Moonves is no longer CEO, this actually has a pretty good chance of happening. The Wrap and Deadline, a couple other big websites have talked about how a merger is probably on the horizon, which would mean that Star Trek, the Star Trek movies and the Star Trek TV shows would once again, for the first time since 2005, be back under the same corporate umbrella, which would mean good things for the Star Trek movies not being in a separate canon than the TV shows are.
Good. Yeah, I like that.
So I'm assuming that, if there is that legal precedent that everything has to be 25% different than it was on the TV side of things, my guess is that would go back. If that is a thing, there are conflicting reports.
There's conflicting reports, sure.
Kurtzman was asked if he's had any conversations about taking over the Trek films. And he said he had opinions on the future of the franchise on the big screen, but he says he would approach it more from the point of view of what kinds of stories can't we tell on television that are better for the big screen. And Caden said that it would be best to have everything play in the same universe. So that they're looking at it from your perspective, which I'm fine with. I'd be interested to see if we get those two things remerged.
Yeah, I would love that.
That'd be awesome. That's all my news. That's all I got.
Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Lots of exciting things coming on the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, and I know we said earlier that we would tackle some feedback this episode. I ran out of time. I apologize. We will hit up a feedback episode in the next week or two.
Yeah, I'm down next Monday if you want to do that. We can try. Well, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll be back real soon with lots more Star Trek. Peace.
Live long and prosper.
To reach out to us, hit us up at StarTrekUcast.com, at StarTrekUcast on Twitter, Star Trek Universe Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for us there, or send us a message at StarTrekUcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv. And if you want to hear more from Matthew Carroll, that's me, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or go listen to my music at MatthewCarrollmusic.com or anywhere you get music.